Alright, so for this video on simplifying radicals, I'm only going to do 1, 2, 3, and 6. 4 and 5 you can look at on the key that's posted on Canvas or ask your teacher for some help. But they're very similar to the other problems I'm going to do on the video. Number 1, when you simplify radicals, you can use a factor tree. I prefer just to use find the largest perfect square, the method of perfect squares that goes into 75. Well, the biggest perfect square that goes into 75 is going to be 25. And when you rewrite radical 75, that's radical 3 times radical 25, because 3 times 25 is 75. When I simplify that, radical 25 breaks down to be 5, and radical 3 does not break down, and it stays the same. That would be 5 radical 3 as its most simplified form. So always look for the biggest perfect square that goes into the square root that you're starting with. For number 2, I have a plus sign, which means I'm going to end up adding these together. But radicals act kind of in the way like x's and variables do. You could think of this as being like a y plus 5x. Right now, they don't have the same radical, so I can't combine them together. In order to combine radicals, you have to be the same. But the thing is, I can simplify radical 8. Radical 8 is the same thing as radical 4 times radical 2, which is 2 radical 2. And notice, when I simplify radical 8, that now they both have a radical 2, which means that I can add them together by combining their coefficients. 2 plus 5 is 7 radical 2. And that would be your final answer there. I don't know what that is. Let's get rid of that. There we go. Okay, number 3, we are going to simplify. First, remember, when you have a fraction under a radical, you start by breaking up the square root to be radical 16 over radical 5. When I simplify that, I get 4. Radical 16 is 4 over radical 5. Well, I don't like radicals in the denominator of fractions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rationalize that fraction by multiplying by a fancy 1, which is the denominator over the denominator. When I do that, I get 4 radical 5 in the numerator. Sorry, it's a little crammed up in this problem. And then radical 5 times radical 5, I'll do this up above, equals radical 25, which is just 5. Remember, when we did these, every time you multiply 2 radicals together that are the same, you end up getting the radicand, the number under the radical, as your simplified form. So this is radical 5, 4 radical 5 over 5. And 4 over 5 does not simplify, so that would be your most simplified answer. Number 4 is very similar to number 3. Number 5 is very similar to number 6, but I'm going to do number 6 with you here. So we're looking at number 6. In order to rationalize this fraction, I need to multiply by its conjugate. All right, remember the conjugate of 8 minus radical 2 is 8 plus radical 2. Right, you take the same terms, but you put the different sign in the middle. So let's multiply this out. I'm going to rewrite it down here. I have negative 4 All right, well, when I simplify this, I'm going to start by multiplying the negative 4 with the 8 and the negative 4 with the radical 2. Negative 4 times 8 is negative 32. Negative 4 times radical 2 is minus 4 radical 2. It just goes in front of the radical. And in the denominator, you can do this the simplified way. I'll show you in a second. But you're going to multiply, FOIL the denominator. So 8 times 8 is 64. Plus 8 radical 2, minus 8 radical 2, and then negative radical 2 times a positive will be negative radical 4, but remember radical 4 simplifies to be 2. those middle terms are going to cancel off, positive and negative 8 radical 2. So you end up with negative 32 minus 4 radical 2 over 64 minus 2, which is 62. Notice that the coefficients I have are all even. So I could divide those all by 2 and get the answer negative 16 minus 2 radical 2 over 31. And that would be the final simplified answer. Now, if you wanted a shortcut, instead of foiling to get the denominator here, what you can do, notice the middle terms always cancel off. So I showed you this shortcut once before. You don't have to do it, but you could take the 8 times 8, which is 64. There's not going to be a radical in my answer, so I can skip to the part that's negative radical 2 times radical 2, which is minus 2. And that gives me the 62 that I ended up having in the denominator. If you can't remember that or that's too much for you, go ahead and just FOIL out the denominator. All right? That's the end of the video here, but I want you to go back and try 4 and 5. 5 is the same as number 6, just different.